Hello and welcome to the King Pair podcast. Now we know we've been away for a while, so returning to talking about our favorite game. And obviously, since there's been a lot happening since then, there's been Ashes, there's some talk about Asia Cup, there's also been IPL, but that's far into the past now. So obviously, we'll be taking the discussion through Ashes first, and then following it on to the Asia Cup. And to talk it all with me is Stuff. Hey, Stuff, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good too. Please take it away.
Yeah, it's nice to be back recording the show again. And yeah, we're going to start off with the Ashes. Well, the two Ashes that happened over the past couple months. We had the women's Ashes and the men's Ashes, and they both ended up going almost the exact same way really. In both series, you had Australia taking a huge early lead on the overall points tally for the women's Ashes. Australia won the first 3 games in a row to go 6-0 up, or
Actually,
sorry, they won the
first two games,
yeah first
first
two
two,
games in a
Test
row,
and
but
the T20.
the first they go 6-0 up with those victories. And in the
Yes.
men's Ashes, around the same time, Australia win the first two tests and go 2-0 up. And at any point across both series, if Australia win one more game, they win the Ashes outright. But then they don't win the next game. And the women's Ashes, in fact, they keep losing games right up until the second to last match. And in the men's Ashes, England win the next game and have Australia on the ropes in the fourth test. But in both cases, England are just barely not able to get over the line in that penultimate game, which allows Australia to retain the Ashes in both events. In the women's Ashes, was because Australia reached the 8 point margin, and 8 points is enough to guarantee that the other team cannot pass you. And in the men's Ashes, the fourth test was drawn, so Australia 2-1 up with 1 game to go. England cannot win the series anymore, so Australia retained the Ashes. But despite that, England rallied for the final match, and they win anyways to deny Australia a victory, a series victory in both events. The men's Ashes series is drawn, and the women's Ashes, the series totals are shared, and England actually win both limited over series. In fact, they hand Australia their first ODI series defeat in quite a while, which we'll get to in a little bit. But yeah, it's very interesting. Both of these Ashes, they went on at basically the same time, and they go in pretty much identical ways. And they were just so close, so close to being perhaps two of the greatest comeback series we've ever seen. But despite that, they were still incredible to watch.
Hmm. They were. Australia retained the women's Ashes due to, let's say, Jess Jonathan, who bowled that last over in the second ODI, where she defended, I think it was 16 or 15 to get, and she defended it against Nat Brandt. And the men's Ashes was probably retained due to some rain dances because obviously it was the rain that that saved Australia in the fourth test. Although you can also attribute it some of that to Marnus, who actually scored a really good 100 on the day four, because there's a good chance we could have seen Australia collapse on that day. But ultimately, what happened was, well, there was some rain and the 50 was called off. But here's my question to you, actually, because everyone keeps going into what ifs, and I assume you also like to go into some what ifs. So are we still believing that England would have won both those games? I mean, the fourth test, was the fourth Ashes test, and the let's say the second ODI, women's ODI as well, had it been someone else and had there not been the rain.
Well, yeah, like it's obviously tough to talk about hypotheticals because both England and Australia don't go into that final game in the same mindset if if both series are still up for grabs. But like there isn't that much we can really look into otherwise. In reality, England do win both of those final games, but again, like perhaps things are different if the series is still alive. But it does make for a much more interesting, I think, topic of discussion if we do sort of presuppose that England do win those final games regardless. And in both cases, then England have pulled off a miraculous comeback to win the Ashes.
And there's one interesting thing about the last games that Australia won in both cases. So in the men's case, it was the second test where Ben Stokes scored 155 in the chase of, it was 364, I think, or 374, I think. And in women's Ashes, the first T20 that Australia won, uh, the game was actually pretty close. It went to the last over, and in that game as well, I think it was Amy Jones who scored 43 of 21 when England were batting. So, do you think things changed a lot moral-wise for England due to the fight they showed in their last defeats, and from there on things started turning, or was it just something else?
Yeah, so England have not won the women's Ashes in quite a while. They win some games here and there, but it's sort of like the women's analog of what happened with the men's team in that very long darkness period between 1989 and 2005. Um, so for England, you do have to sort of think that they probably are starting to get into that state of mind where, like, it's no matter what we do, we can't beat Australia. They just played a Women's World Cup final last year where England had a really good tournament and they play really well in the final, but they get blown out because Australia are just this unstoppable monster. So you do sort of have to think that um, that sort of doubt might sort of be creeping in that we just can't compete with these guys, with these gals. But Australia do struggle to get over the line in that first T20, and that might just be that sort of small impetus to restore confidence in the team that, look, Australia are immortal, and we can beat them. We've shown that we got so close. Now we just need to get over the line next time, and that is what happens. And they get over the line a few more times to almost pull off that miraculous comeback.
Hmm. And moving on to the game that England did win, I mean, for men's, it was just the third test, where again, as you said, the game was really close, and at one point, England looked like losing it. I mean, what they were 170 for six, chasing 250, and then we had the obviously the Chris Wokes and Harry Brook partnership that almost won the game, although I think Harry Brooks got out and Mark Wood had to come in and finish the game off. And on the women's side, there was Alice Capsey, who actually finished the chase in the second game, if I remember correctly. And this is something interesting that comes out of again both the games, because there had been almost similar scripts as we have seen in the second games of both the series, and it happened again in the third game because Capsy came in and changed the flow of the game in the women's side. Mark Wood and Chris Vokes obviously both came in and changed the flow of series there as well. So, are we really looking at it at as something that involvement of someone like Mark would change things, or is it just that you know England just got better from there on? Because from an overall perspective, James Anderson was still struggling a lot even after Wood and Vokes came in. So it almost looked like England was missing something rather than just not being incompetent or something. And that happened in the women's side as well. They were missing one good innings from the top, and that happened, and they won the game, just like it happened in the ODIs as well, where Heather Knight and Kate Cross won it for them. So do you think that had been happening for England continuously? In the tests, in the women's test as well, because they could not fight outside Tammy Bowman's double hundred. Everyone kind of fell apart once their fifth wicket fell in the first innings as well, and same happened in the second innings as well. So do you think they were just missing some components, in the team, or was it really a team effort?
Yeah, it's hard to like pin down one specific thing as being the sort of pivotal moment because even like as we saw in the first few games in both the men's and the women's ashes, England do get very close to winning even without these magic bullets. Um, but yeah, like just having one or two people come in, perhaps showing a new perspective on how to play, perhaps being a little bit less jaded by a long summer up until this point, just some getting some fresh legs in there. That can really inspire the team to rally behind these sort of new figures. Right, Wood didn't take part in the two pretty crushing victories England suffered in the first two men's tests. Like they were both very close games that England barely just couldn't get over the line for, and Wood didn't feature in them, and because he'd been injured, he'd been recuperating, and so having someone like him with his qualities to come in completely fresh in the third game and just rip through Australia early on, that can really inspire a team to sort of rally behind and keep the fight going. And yeah, Wokes also offered a similar new perspective on how to play and how to win, and it ended up working quite well. Because again, England do win the third test, but it's also a very close test, the type of which England almost got over the line within the first two ones, but couldn't. So perhaps, yeah, these three new faces, because Moeen Ali also comes in for the third game. Like just having different people can help shape a game in a different way uh, than what came before. And yeah, it's a similar story in the women's ashes. Again, like you just need for series so close between teams that are on paper very very close in ability. You just need that sort of one thing to change it up, and if with just that one victory that England do get in both the women's and the men's ashes, and almost the same time, really, because the two T20s England win in the women's ashes, they're right on either side of the test match that England win in the men's ashes. So this is all again happening at the same time, the same script happening in both of these series, and it's like that probably also helped inspire the other team as well. The England's men's side helped inspire the women's team and vice versa, just to show that this can be done. And for the remainder of the next couple weeks, they're both chasing this unlikely series victory, and they both come so close.
Hmm. And it has kind of been, Australia's theme, isn't it? Like they had been winning all these critical moments in the game, like, right? Because in the women's ashes or in the men's ashes, we saw how first test, when Australia were 227 for 8 and they still needed 56 runs, Cummins and Lyon got it for them. Same in the second test where Stokes was batting really well and Hazelwood got him out. Even in the first innings where England were going really well, they were like 177 for one at one point and then get bowled out for 316. Even in the women's game where Tammy Beaumont was going really well, and then despite being 400 for 5 at one point, England were bowled out for 464. So, are we looking it at as Australia just falling apart after having some, after playing some good cricket in critical moments, or are we really seeing it as England finally catching up to Australia in these moments?
I think Australia definitely were rattled once that sort of chink of invincibility came off, and the women's team didn't have Lanning for the whole tour, and Lanning is sort of uh, this massive guiding figure in the Australian women's team, and without her, they really seem to they really seem to get in their own heads a lot more than they used to. And yeah, just losing that second T20 by such a close margin, and then losing the third one right after that, and probably seen what's happening in the men's game as well with the men's team starting to struggle again, and just the media coverage that came with the women's team, the England women's team, surging back into the series. That probably all got into Australia's heads a little, and just that tiny little extra, uh, that tiny extra, mental games playing on them that probably hurt them a little bit. And uh, I feel like with Healy as captain versus with Lanning, Australia weren't as capable of rising to that. But they do get over the line just barely in that second ODI to seal the women's Ashes. And yeah, in the men's Ashes as well. Again, like similar story. Like I'm gonna keep saying this whole time I'm talking about this, but this is a very similar story in both series. Where again, like you just feel that Australia get incredibly rattled once England start to creep back into the series. Once England are way ahead in that fourth test, with the whole media circus coming around the series again, and everyone talking up like, oh, England are about to pull off this incredible comeback, and I feel like Australia didn't help themselves too much to not play into that by like they play much worse in those final three tests than they did in the first two. And were it not for rain on the final day, and also Labuschagne standing up quite well in the third innings of the fourth test, Australia probably do succumb to that immense pressure, but they hang on just barely. And again, like I've said many times, just like in the women's series, just like in the men's series, the same thing is going on. Australia hang on and they win the Ashes, but again, just barely.
Speaking of same things, I think there's a certain Ashes that had seen a similar script. You want to talk about it?
Well, you're going to get a lot of comparisons to 2005, probably. But England do get over the line in 2005. They don't here. Um, but every pretty much every 4 years since 2005, whenever there's a new Ashes in England, the English media build it up as this is going to be the greatest Ashes since 2005. Because 2005 was just this incredible series that it still lives in the memory because just every perfect thing happened, and it also isn't as good without the context of it being 16 years since England last held the Ashes and all that. And I don't think any series since that can match that same sort of context because it doesn't have that context. Australia have not been as dominant since 2005 because they haven't been as good since 2005. England haven't been as bad since they were in since pre 2005. So that just can't happen. But like on a match by match basis, this series almost goes the whole way. And I think 2019 was also an incredible Ashes series, but that doesn't stack up to 2005 on quite the same match by match basis. It has a lot of very good stories coming into it and a lot of stories coming out of it. Um, but again, it just doesn't have that sort of, this sort of feeling of eternal battle between England and Australia being turned on its head that 2005 did. And this series, I would have, I was like I think very highly of the 2019 Ashes. I enjoyed that a ton. And my expectations for this series was not to match 2005, it was to match 2019. And I think it did. I think it's even better than 2019, which is a series I love to death. But it still doesn't quite stack up to 2005 just because there's just so much more that went into that series that this one didn't have. But still, fantastic, fantastic series. And again, I think it's just incredible that this happened at the same time as the women's Ashes that went out the exact same way. And I think that raises both series as well up a level. But it still just can't quite reach the level that 2005 reached, and that there's no shame in that. It's one of the greatest series of all time.
And the biggest thing is, every time someone brings up 2005, we completely forget how dominant the Australian victory in the first test was, right? Everyone remembers England being 21 for 5, 21 for 4 in the first test. Obviously, McGrath getting injured, Lyon getting injured is kind of a parallel, although you can really not compare those two situations because Australia were far better side back then than they are now. Even though some people would you know compare and that, but I mean, is there even a comparison with 2005 year? Because as you said, it is much more comparable to 2019 because of obviously the whole being 1-0 down or 2-0 down in the series and still managing to square it. But again, 2005 2005 is far different from any series, like any Ashes that has taken place around this time, especially in England. But okay, coming on to the point, uh, so we have seen some past Ashes series that have gone a similar route, and I think one of them is 1936, right? If I remember correctly, where Australia were 2-0 down, and they came back from a similar situation, and they actually won the series. They won it 3-2, and does that Ashes get compared to this one? Because back then, England also had somewhat of a strategy that pulled Australia down, bodyline, if anyone does not remember. So, is 1936 much more comparable to this one, or is that also kind of an island too far?
36, 37 was a like it's an incredible series to read about because that wasn't the bodyline one. The bodyline one was the previous win in Australia, 32-33. Um, so this was the first series in Australia since the first Ash series in Australia since bodyline. So that was sort of uh, playing into the narrative going into that series was, England are here for the first time since bodyline. Australia have got to stick it to them and right the wrongs of 4 years ago. But England win in those first two games, and they win quite convincingly, and they do it without Bodyline, because Bodyline by this point had been outlawed. So it's like a crushing blow for Australia in those first two tests to lose so convincingly. Um, and it makes it all the greater what happens in the following three games. Bradman finally remembers how to bat, and he does Bradman things. Scores three centuries. He scores a 270 in one of the games, batted in number seven, where they reversed the order. Like it's just some incredible stories from that series. It's arguably Bradman at his greatest, and Australia win three in a row to overturn a 2-0 deficit to win 3-2. It's the only time ever a team has come back from 2-0 down to win the series. In Test cricket's very long history. It's only happened once, and it was then. And if this series did end up going the same way and became the second series in history where a team came back from 2-0 down to win 3-2, it would probably be remembered in the same way that 36-37 is. Like, to be fair, I feel like most people talking about cricket nowadays don't know anything about 36-37 aside from that Bradman played in it. And Australia win 3-2 after being 2-0 down. Um, but like you would get a lot more comparisons being drawn between the two if that is what happened, but it wasn't. And also I feel like it's just like a different sort of feeling between that series and this one because a lot of the margins of that series were quite one-sided. It's only really that one test where Australia reversed the batting order because of rain shenanigans, because pitches were uncovered and they were incredibly tough to play on after rain because this was the 1930s and cricket is just a very different game in the 1930s. Um, but yeah, like if you can read more about 36-37, I highly recommend you should. It's a fantastic series to learn about, but it has a different feel to this one because in this one, pretty much every single game went right down to the wire, except for that fourth test, which was rained out. That would have been a comfortable England victory in all likelihood if it wasn't for the rain. But the other four tests are all right on a knife edge. Whereas you can't really say the same for much of that 36-37 series. But yeah, like I like hearing people talk about older series, and if England did win this 3-2 after being 2-0 down, we'd probably get a lot more people talking about that 36-37 series, and that would have been a lot of fun. But oh well, that's not the world we live in.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the everything is kind of a trade of its time. And as you said, 36, 37 was a different time. Back then, the playing conditions were a lot different, as you said. And moving on from them, I think we can talk about two certain gentlemen whose careers ended with this Ashes, two English gentlemen in this case. And do you want to take us forward with them?
Yeah, so right it's right at the end of the fifth test, was it?
Day four.
Or yeah, right near the end of that test, Stuart Broad announced his retirement from all cricket, and it sort of came out of nowhere. Um, and yeah, like it's just Broad has had an incredible career. Arguably one of the top 10, top 15, some would even say top 5 bowlers in England's very long, very storied history as a Test nation. And yeah, he gets to retire on top. He took a wicket with his last ball. He hit a six off the last ball he batted. Takes a wicket off the last ball he bowls. It's hard to go out in a better way than that. And yeah, Broad has had an incredible career. And as Broad's walking off after England win the Ashes, he's walking off with Moeen Ali. And then after the game, Moeen says he's also retired from Test cricket and he's not playing again. Now he did say the same thing like at the start of the year, and here he is now playing 3 more Tests in an Ashes series. But he said that this time is definitely last time he's playing Test cricket. So Moeen as well, very he's not obviously not has as a successful career as Broad, but most people don't. Moeen he's played a lot of games. He's played a lot of games in a lot of countries, a lot of different positions, a lot of different roles. Sometimes he's been a primary spinner. Sometimes he's been an opening batter. Sometimes he's been played as a true all rounder. Moeen just fits in whatever gap England needed him to. Sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. But he's had a remarkable career. Anyone that's played, what was it, 60, 70 tests Moeen played, takes scores 3,000 runs, over 3,000 runs, and takes 200 wickets. Only 3 other English players have done that, and one of them is Broad.
Stuart Broad.
And yeah, just two very remarkable careers, uh, both going out in the same time, and it is also incredible that James Anderson plays most of the games in this series, and he debuted before both Broad and Moeen, and it seems he's going to continue playing long after they're both retired.
James Anderson is unique in many ways. I mean, he was playing before we started watching cricket, so maybe he will continue till we stop watching cricket as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah,
Broad and
talking about
Moyne, yeah, sorry, Broad and Moyne retiring together reminds me of one of my favorite series ever, 2014 Sri Lanka Tour of England. Now that doesn't end well for Broad and Moyne because England lose that series 1-0 and sort of like almost the down point for England after they get whitewashed in the Ashes in their previous series, and then they go 1-0 down to India right after this. But that was like they're both like very pivotal players in that series because in the first test, Broad bowls that last over, and he almost gets the 2 wickets to win England the game in the final over, and England come just barely, not close enough. And in the second test, Moeen, who had debuted in the first test, made his test debut in the first test, and in the second test he scores his maiden 100, and he almost gets England over the line with that incredible partnership with Anderson, England, where he and Anderson for the 11th wicket, for the 10th wicket, they bat over an hour. Anderson has like a 60 ball duck. I think they're there for like 20 overs almost with 1 wicket left, and they make it to the final over. And with 2 balls to go, Anderson gets out. Um, but yeah, Broad and Moyne, big characters in that series, which a series I will always love to talk about. And yeah, if I have one memory of Moyne, it's probably that 2014 series against Sri Lanka. For Broad, he had many other amazing moments in his career, but I just want to bring up that series because they both had really good turns in that.
and 2014 was a weird time, wasn't it, for Test cricket in general? Because a lot of big names, especially 1770s born names, were gone from cricket in general. Obviously, for England themselves, they had recently, I mean, not they were not necessarily 70s born, but Kevin Peterson, Graham Swan, Jonathan Trott, they were all gone. And even for the teams that they were playing against were kind of starting to phase out of their old guard. So now thinking about those games, especially because Moeen Ali actually won England the game against India in the third test, was it? Where I think India were chasing a really big total on day five and they got bowled out. And that was probably the first thing that I remember about Moeen Ali. Although for Broad, it would be the T20 series against Pakistan that they played in 2006. I think it was August 2006 where he debuted. That was my first memory of uh, Stuart Broad, and
Yeah.
obviously, first positive memory of him. Actually, memorable thing that he did was that 100 partnership against India with I think it was a Ravi Bopara, where they were like 110 for seven and still needed 100 runs to win in an ODI against India, and then that partnership changed the game. So obviously, Broad has been around for a long time. I mean, between him, debuting and obviously retiring, we saw Alistair Cook's whole career, and then some a few years. So, and Alistair Cook actually played 168 tests. So you can actually imagine how uh, long Stuart Broad has lasted, because we have seen that fast bowlers do not last as long as James Anderson and Stuart Broad have. I mean, I cannot even remember a fast bowler lasting for 120 tests. I think Dale Steyn is 93. There's Glenn McGrath with 110, I think, or something. Not sure about it. But it is incredible, isn't it? The number of tests these two guys managed to pass. Obviously, Moeen Ali played 63. But yeah, I mean, the longevity of Stuart Broad, obviously, since he's the talking point here, is something that would keep everyone really curious to how that how both of them managed to stay so fit all these through these years and kept being that quality of bowlers that they were, right?
Yeah, so for a long time, there was just this. Whenever I'd look at the Cricinfo stats pages, all the records, most Test matches played, there would be this huge gap between Tendulkar at 200 and Ponting at 168. Ponting and Watt 168 each, and it looked like it just seemed like there was just this impenetrable barrier between those two. Like nobody could ever go in between them because everyone that came close, they would retire just before they get there. Callis looked like he'd get through there, then he retired at 166. Chanderpaul looked like he'd get through there, then he retired at 164. Cook looked like he'd smash through even Sachin's 200, but he retires at 161. So it just seemed like nobody could go in between that. But then Anderson does, and he keeps going, and he keeps going, and he keeps going. Now he's at 183, and Broad as well. He almost breaks into there, but he retires at 167, just short of Ponting and Steve Waugh. And yeah, like they're the two most capped fast bowlers of all time. Next is all the way down Courtney Walsh at 132, then Kapil Dev 131, and then even further down McGraw 124, and uh, Chaminda Voss 111. Like they're way ahead of everybody else out there, every other fast bowler out there. And like Anderson's a freak, whatever. But Broad as well, incredibly long career, longer than any other fast bowler except for Anderson. And yeah, just like you gotta it's hard to just not respect that at all. Like incredible player. What else can you really say?
Mhm. And now that we are done talking about the Ashes, I think there's another tournament coming up real soon, and that is the Asia Cup. And this time it is kind of a hybrid presentation. half of it being in Sri Lanka and half of it being in Pakistan. So you want to take us away for all the drama?
This has been the most exhausting news cycle for a tournament ever, and like just this and the World Cup being back to back, it's been so tiring to see so many opportunists trying to stir up drama, stir up, take things out of context, make shit up, do whatever they can to cause problems, and just make people angry online. And it's so tiring to have to sift through all of it. But here we are. The Asia Cup is finally happening. It's 2 weeks away. They've sorted out all the issues. There's been much more going on behind the scenes than we will probably ever know. But it's worked out. We've come up with a solution that will hopefully make everybody feel fine with themselves. It's So we have some games in Pakistan, some games in Sri Lanka. The games in Pakistan are, funnily enough, two of Sri Lanka's games from the first round, and only one of Pakistan. Two of Pakistan games will be held in Pakistan, but that is assuming Pakistan make the second round, which they probably will. But if they don't, then you get two, or I think you no, it's two Sri Lanka games in Pakistan, two Bangladesh or two Afghanistan games in Pakistan, and uh, only one Pakistan game in Pakistan, which would be quite funny. But oh well. Um, but yeah, India will play all their games in Sri Lanka. It's set up to be that way no matter what, because they've sorted out seeding where Pakistan's always going to be the one seed in their group. India will always be the two seed. Um, Sri Lanka will always be the one seed. Bangladesh will always be the two seed or something like that. Um, like it's not that important. It's just like they've thought about how to set this up in a way that Sri Lanka will play all their Super Four games in Sri Lanka. Pakistan will play all of their first round games in uh, Pakistan, except for the one against India, and they'll play a game in the second round against in Pakistan, but one that's not against Sri Lanka or India. Like they've thought it out where that will definitely happen. So like all of the logistical challenges they've been overcome. So we will get an Asia Cup. It's been a very long and tiring route to get here, but it will happen. And I don't know, like I love the Asia Cup a lot. I think it is a phenomenal tournament. Just uh, like it's always so much fun. The only bad side is that the format has never once been good, but that's fine. Cricket hates having good tournament formats, so we will leave it. We'll give the Asia Cup a pass for having bad formats since forever. It always produces amazing cricket, and I think it sucks so much that the last two since the pandemic, the Asia Cup has just been this cursed tournament that nothing has gone right for it. Because for the one in 2020, uh, COVID happens like right before it's supposed to happen. So first, it gets moved to Sri Lanka with the hope that they'll be able to host it in the island nation of Sri Lanka at the same date as originally planned, and then COVID spreads to Sri Lanka and the rest of the world. Everything shuts down, so the tournament gets postponed originally for 1 year, and then it's just not brought up in 2021, so it gets postponed again to 2022. But there's already supposed to be an Asia Cup in 2022, so that gets pushed to 2023, and then the 2022 Asia Cup in Sri Lanka, it's like Sri Lanka almost collapses as a country leading up to it, so it gets moved to the UAE very late. Like there's just this big like it just everything that could go wrong does go wrong with the planning of the 2022 Asia Cup, but it does end up getting played in the UAE, and it's a lot of fun. Everybody enjoys it, and you have this miracle story of Sri Lanka winning the tournament that they were supposed to host, but they couldn't because their country is on the verge of collapse because their prime minister is incredibly corrupt and causing a lot of issues. And it's it's amazing, right? Like I don't care that Pakistan didn't win that tournament, even though we lost the final, because Sri Lanka winning is such an amazing story that I can't begrudge them that. And then the next year, in when the 2022 tournament ends, like it seems everything will be fine with Pakistan hosting 2023. Then everything that can go wrong in Pakistan does go wrong in the 12 months after that, and it's just this very steady descent of, will Pakistan host the Asia Cup? Will they just host it without India? That's not possible. Maybe they'll host it in the UAE again. Maybe someone else will host it. Maybe they'll host it hybrid. And there's a lot of back and forth. The what I think happened was, originally Pakistan, the PCB was adamant about hosting it in Pakistan, and everybody else said that it's not going to happen. We need India in the tournament, or yeah, we need India in the tournament, or the tournament's not going to happen because the Asia Cup has always just been an excuse to have India Pakistan matches, as we know. Um, so then eventually the PCB calm down and they say, okay, we will host it hybrid. But by this point, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, they both see that it's possible for them to host the tournament by themselves. So they start saying, no, we don't want a hybrid tournament. We want you to host it in Bangladesh or Sri Lanka. And then there's a lot of back and forth politicking, but eventually they decide on a hybrid tournament where most of the tournament is actually in Sri Lanka and not Pakistan. But it's better than the tournament not happening at all. Um, but yeah, like it's just been a mess, and it's so sad that this has happened to the Asia Cup. It's just become a grounds for people to just start getting mad at each other on the internet, and it's very annoying. But hopefully, the fingers crossed, 2024 Asia Cup happens as planned, as normal. This never happens again with the Asia Cup. It becomes this, amazing tournament that everybody loves, and it's entirely controversy free for the rest of its existence. But for the one coming up, um, who do you think will win?
Now, first of all, I would like to kind of disregard your opinion here, because even though the drama was exhausting, it was also very entertaining. And now, okay, moving on from that, I think this year's obviously something that is not by fault of our own, but obviously due to some outside factors, it is a hybrid hosting, and due to that fact, I think Pakistan would probably now be second favorites. Had it been in Pakistan itself, I would say they are the favorites to win the tournament. But with half the tournament being here and half being there, and remember, obviously Pakistan would be the side that would have to travel the most through the stages. I think obviously it makes them like further unfair. I mean, not the maybe the second favorite, but even though, assuming that maybe they and Sri Lanka make it to the final, then again they suddenly you have Pakistan being the number one favorite. So there's no real, there's no static target for someone to be favorite or not be favorite here, because obviously due to the nature of the tournament. But despite that, I'd say India are kind of you know the favorite here, because they have played in Sri Lanka, and the conditions suit them pretty well. Mostly Pakistan would be hoping to get the final. I think the final has not been decided yet, right? Or is it being hosted in Sri Lanka only?
Yeah, final is supposed to be in Sri Lanka.
Right. So that would actually further favor India, because India have a really good record in Sri Lanka, especially the white ball. So they would be hoping to make it to the final. And mostly there's Sri Lanka, who, even though they are hosting the tournament, I mean, in general terms, they would still be starting as the third favorite, especially due to the format. This is the ODI Asia Cup, not the T20. T20 is obviously, as we've seen, a much more combustible format. So I'd say it is India first and Pakistan second, given the conditions, especially because even though Pakistan's batting is much more stronger than India, bowling is much more, you know, it is kind of tough to tell, especially given how both India and Pakistan bowling can melt down at times. But batting wise, obviously Pakistan is further ahead with their top three, especially. And but since it is not in Pakistan and it is in Sri Lanka, where Indian bowling has done well in last two outings at least, that is 2021 and 2017. I'd say India is the first and Pakistan is the second, with the Sri Lanka being the dark horses. What about you?
Um, yeah, I'd say Pakistan are first, India are second. I would, yeah, I'd probably have Sri Lanka as the most likely outside of those two to win. But like I thought Bangladesh were looking decent coming into this, but now Damim has suddenly retired and Shakib's been made the captain. I'm not quite sure how that's going to go, so I'm going to hold off on speaking too well of Bangladesh for now. But I think they are. I think they'll make the second round for once, for the first time in a while this time, because I think there is a lot more quality there than they've shown in the last couple of Asia Cups and or in the last Asia Cup specifically. Um, and yeah, I think they're definitely one to watch out for. It is interesting that pretty much since like 2018, 2022, and this one, three Asia Cups in a row now. I feel like the common consensus has been Pakistan and India are the two favorites. Pakistan and India will play each other three times, once in the first group stage, second group stage, and then the final. And that has not happened in the last two Asia Cups. Will it happen this time? I don't know, but like surely if we keep saying it, surely it'll happen.
No, I mean, we have seen the Asia Cup happen in the 50 over format and T20 format in UAE, and I mean, I'm still iffy on the UAE pitches and what happens usually there. But coming to Sri Lanka, I think Sri Lanka is like a much fairer, you know, in generally the conditions are much fairer to the teams, especially with the help for the spinners that we have seen even in the recent times. And obviously there's an odd chance for them laying out a flatty as well. So I think this one would be much more closely fought out than the previous one, as we've seen. uh, the last 50 over Asia Cup was kind of a disappointment as well. It had some really thrilling games, but Sri Lanka bowed out really quickly. Afghanistan did really well. They had close games with India and Pakistan. I think their game with Bangladesh was close as well. So, are we looking at thrillers this time as well, or do you think the gap between the teams has grown further since 2018?
I think no matter what, teams will show up to the Asia Cup and they'll all want to win. So we're gonna get close games no matter what.
And that is the thing about the Asia Cups as well, right? I mean, even if we go as further back as say 2016 or 2012, even back then, where Bangladesh was starting to rise up to the team that they had become slowly. We had a lot of close games, even though Sri Lanka did not win a single game in 2016, and they were not that good in 2012 as well, even though they won 2014 in the middle. So that is kind of the thing, isn't it? Like anyone can show up at any time in such tournaments, and it is kind of the tournament that brings out the best out of everyone.
Yeah, and like at 2012, Bangladesh reached the final and they only barely lose to Pakistan in that final. And then 2 years later, in 2014, they lose to Afghanistan in an Asia Cup that's hosted in Bangladesh, which is crazy to think about. Like maybe not as crazy to think about now because they
Hmm.
lost to Afghanistan last time as well in the T21, and they lose in 2018 as well in the UAE. But in 2014, this was Afghanistan's first big win over a full member. I think they'd beaten Zimbabwe up to that point as well in like a couple of
Yeah, they had.
T20s. But that's the first time they beat, like, that's the biggest stage they've ever won a game on at an Asia Cup in Bangladesh. They beat Bangladesh. That's a huge win for Afghanistan, and this is only 2 years after Bangladesh reached the Asia Cup final. So like, there's always crazy stuff going on in this tournament, and like in 2018, India almost lose to Hong Kong. Now 2022 Nepal have made the first ever 2023 Nepal have made the first ever Asia Cup, so it's also be interesting to see how they get on. They're up against India and Pakistan. It's obviously not gonna, like they're it's not gonna be easy for them, but it will be interesting to see how they get on.
Hmm.
And yeah,
And it
that's
is
just what I
the
love so much about the Asia Cup. It's a fantastic tournament.
it is funny, isn't it? Because Bangladesh has made it to the finals of three Asia Cups out of last five tournaments, and I think that is the most times any team has made it to the finals from what I can remember. Because India has only made it to two finals; they've won both. Sri Lanka has made it to two finals, won one, lost one, and Pakistan has, I think, made it to two finals as well, right? I mean, they won in 2012 and they lost in 2022.
Yeah.
So, ironically, Bangladesh is the most, like, statistically, the most successful side coming into the tournament. So, they have some pressure of their past performances, I guess.
Yeah.
And coming to Bangladesh, I mean, they are, there's dramas around Tamim Iqbal, which keeps happening every now and then. He keeps retiring, then he keeps coming back, then he keeps leaving the captaincy, then he gets it back, I think, but he didn't get it back this time. Now Shakib is the captain again. There's some talk with the prime minister of the country, maybe the president. I don't remember. But how exactly is Bangladesh looking at this point? Because we have seen them beat India in Bangladesh. They have Litan Das informed that Shakib Osley. Shakib is kind of an ageless wonder. Tamim Iqbal is kind of thing of past for some people, but maybe he'll turn up this time. And then they have their youngsters that have shown some talent recently, especially with Shanto, who was I mean he was not really good in the white ball, but he did really well in the tests against Afghanistan. And now I feel like building on from the India series. I mean, it is kind of thing of the past, but looks like Bangladesh has some momentum in their favor, even if they're not exactly the host, and Sri Lanka has not been the place that they do too well, from what I remember.
Yeah, Bangladesh. Like the obviously that Bangladesh Sri Lanka derby. It's always a fun time. Sorry about that. Yeah, the Bangladesh Sri Lanka game's always a fun time. And Sri Lanka tend to do better in Sri Lanka than Bangladesh do when they play in Sri Lanka. So yeah, it will be quite interesting to see how Bangladesh get on here because they have had some very good results in the last 12 to 24 months. They finished like I think third or fourth in the ODI Super League. Like they won in South Africa. They had some good wins at home too. Um, it again like they're a solid team. I'm just not quite sure about their stability, but yeah, it will uh, definitely be interesting to see how they get on here.
Hmm. And obviously, with that, we have the fifth team, which is Nepal, and their story to the qualification has been pretty interesting one, hasn't it?
Yeah, so Nepal they've blown a couple of decent chances at qualification in the last few editions. For the 2022 tournament, most of the qualification was done in 2020 because again, the tournament was really supposed to be in 2020, and Nepal don't even make the final stage of qualification because they lost to Singapore in the first round, Singapore and Hong Kong in the first round, so they don't even make it to the final stage where Hong Kong make it to the main event. Um, but for this one, qualification is done at the start of 2023, and it coincides with a period where Nepal is just in the ascendancy. Like at the start of 2023, Nepal almost looked like they would lose ODI status. That's how bad they were in 2022. But the run they go on at the start of 2023 is just ridiculous. They win, I think 8 out of 9 games against Scotland, the UAE, Namibia, and the USA to not only escape the chance of losing ODI stats, they qualify for the World Cup qualifier directly. And it's in this really good stretch that the Asia Cup qualifiers held, and Nepal just dominate the whole way. They don't come close to losing a single game. They only qualify on I think they qualify on ODI ranking because the final is rained out, but the final is rained out when their opposition, the UAE, are like 100 for 9. So that Nepal were very clearly going to win that anyways. But and they hosted that qualifier too. And if you, some of you might remember this, but like when the qualifier was being held, there were all these images being shared. Like, look how much Nepal loves cricket, and like those were some really incredible, some it was this incredible atmosphere at the ground pretty much every time Nepal played because they were finally good and winning
Hmm.
and doing what they should, which is beating most of the teams at this level. And just seeing that all come together is, it was really cool to watch. Obviously, there is some bad stuff to the run, especially with about Sandeep Lamachane. But I'm sure we can save that a bit more for another time. But I, on the whole, Nepal as a team, they've really come together in this the last 8 months. They had a disappointing World Cup qualifier where they finish third to last, I think. Yeah, they only finish above the USA and the UAE. Um, so obviously there is like they struggle against teams that are much better than them. Because they don't get much of a chance to play teams above their level. Because every time they get a chance to get into something like that, they blow it and they lose. This is the first time. This is their first Asia Cup, which is just really weird to think about. Because like Hong Kong have played four, I think. The UAE have played quite a few. Even Kuwait has gotten closer than Nepal have in recent years. But Nepal are finally here at an Asia Cup. It's the first time they're getting to play games against India and Pakistan, and again, like they've shown that they struggle a lot against teams much better than them, but they're only going to get better by being able to play this stuff. So I it'll be interesting to see how they get on. I don't expect them to win a game. I probably don't even expect them to get as close as Hong Kong did in 2018 to winning a game. But it's cool that they're here, and you would hope that finally, after 15 years of Nepal being this country that everybody thinks is going to be the next big thing, finally they're going to actually kick on from here and reach that next level.
Hmm. And that too after we saw them come to a bunch of T20 World Cups. I think it was 2014, right, where they had done really well in the qualifiers. But leave out that and let's talk about people sitting on trees to watch the game. that that was actually actually pretty nice to see. The crowd turnout. And it was at Kirtipur, I think those games were,
Yeah.
and it was really good to see another Asian country having a lot of engagement in the local crowd with the whole qualifiers thing, and Nepal doing well. Yes, obviously it is really good for Asia Cup because the fifth team has always been kind of a weird thing when it comes to Asia Cups. I mean, I first watched it in 2004. Back then it was UAE, I think. Then 2008 it was Hong Kong. It kept on, the format kept on changing. 2010 you don't even get a fourth team, fifth team, beg your pardon. Then again there's 2012, which again did not have the fifth team, if I remember correctly. We had Afghanistan from there on, and obviously then we expanded back to six. We had Hong Kong and Afghanistan. So the format has been, as you said, cricket does not like good formats, and Asia Cup is no different to that. But I really hope we continue with the 16 format, shouldn't we? Because it is a really good format to, at least have all kinds of representation, especially from the associate sites who are, someone like Nepal that is getting, who are really improving as of now.
Yeah, I think the Asia Cup, either with 6 teams, I think it would be cool to see it sort of go like the Six Nations in rugby, where every team, like, they play 5 games, they play everybody, and each game is like at somebody's home. So like like they switch it every year. It's like one year Afghanistan would play in Sri Lanka, and the next year Sri Lanka would play in Afghanistan. Like probably the UAE, but like they switch home and away every year. But like it's the Six Nations is a great tournament, and I think it would be a lot of fun if the Asia Cup went that way. I also think just an 8 team format like the Champions Trophy would work amazingly for the Asia Cup. I think there is so much more they can do with the format, and I hate that they stick with this awful one. But at least it's happening. It's better than the Asia Cup not happening at all.
Hmm, that is true as well. I mean, Asia Cup has always been this weird tournament, hasn't it? I mean, we did not get one due to COVID. We did not get one due to Champions Trophy. But this time it is also unique in one other way because even though we have seen an Asia Cup take place in September, which was 2018, it took place in UAE. Usually, the tournament goes through in late June, early July, especially when it is happening in subcontinent. So we have 2004, 2008, both being in this late June, early July window. Then there was also 2010 that took place in the same window. There was back-to-back tournaments 2012, 14, and 16 that then moved forward to March window, and then we went back to this August September kind of window with the UAE. But now this is kind of an unique situation as well because this time the tournament is in subcontinent, but it is not either in that March window or in that June July window. It is in kind of a timeline where not a lot of cricket takes place in the subcontinent because it is basically monsoon. I mean, it is still monsoon here. So, what are your expectations from generally from this situation? Because we might see games getting rained out because, as I said, this is peak monsoon time. Even though the weather might be receding a little, obviously because we'll soon be kind of transitioning to a season where rain could be heavy or low given on given days, but it could also be really hot or cold if there's rain around. So what are your expectations from both weather wise and conditions wise from Sri Lankan and Pakistan pitches?
Honestly, I'm not really sure because like it is just it's rare to see games play this time of year for in this part of the world. So I imagine like it will be probably quite tough conditions to play in. Um, because yeah, like we're expecting monsoon rain, but it's also just gonna be hot and humid as well. So that'll like it'll be probably a little tough to watch at times for us at home seeing the players struggling a little bit with the heat, and also if anyone goes to watch the tournament in person. But yeah, it's it's still the Asia Cup. Like these are still good teams that like playing each other, like playing close games. It'll be a fun tournament. How it ends up, the exact conditions I can't really say, but we'll find out soon enough, won't we?
Mhm. So any final words on the tournament before we cut off?
Yeah, I just hope the tournament goes well. I hope we're done with all the Asia Cup drama, and I hope it never happens again. And I hope for the World Cup as well coming up, I hope we're done with all the World Cup drama and never have to think about it again.
Okay, so that is it for today, and hopefully we'll see you back for the Asia Cup preview. And till then, it's goodbye.
Bye.